Up next in the broadcast, North Korea pushes back at the United Nations, discrediting the global body's recent human rights report and asking for resolutions against the regime's human rights records to be dropped. Young Koreans in their 20s and 30s are finding that their incomes are rising in the 0% range, and that's having economists worrying about a negative impact on the overall Korean economy. And in the first part of our special series on China, the world's second largest economy, tonight we delve into what's slowing it down and what it will take for a turnaround. Primetime News begins now.
Welcome to the program. You're watching Primetime News. Live from Seoul, I am Kang, Chery.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. We begin with North Korea's repeated demands to the UN Human Rights Council to drop resolutions against the regime's alleged crimes against humanity.
Now, the regime's foreign minister says the core testimony in a UN human rights report was based on lies of criminals. Our Hwang Sung-hee reports on Pyongyang's address in Geneva.
North Korea's Foreign Minister Lee Soo-young used his platform to denounce a landmark UN report on Pyongyang's human rights abuses that was published last year. Addressing the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva on Tuesday, Lee called for the resolutions based on the report to be revoked immediately, since the core testimonies have been proven to be false.
The act of cooking up the report of the Commission of Inquiry based on lies of a few such criminals is itself a mistake, which is completely against the aspiration of the UN for civilization and the rule of law.
The recent backtracking by prominent defector Shin Dong-hyuk on the details of his life in a North Korean prison camp fueled the regime's attempts to discredit the entire UN report. Lee said the world body should also look into the CIA's harsh treatment of terror suspects.
The UN must put an end to its selectiveness on dealing with human rights issues by listing the U.S. brutality of torture as an urgent issue.
But North Korea's claims were met with strong calls by South Korea to immediately end its human rights violations.
We call on the DPRK to immediately take concrete and sincere steps so that its people can carry on a normal, dignified life.
At a separate conference, the North Korean diplomat called the ongoing joint military drills between Washington and Seoul a rehearsal for a nuclear war against Pyongyang and threatened to launch a preemptive strike on the U.S. if necessary. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
Perhaps another sign of worsening bilateral relations between Korea and Japan. Tokyo's foreign ministry's website has revised one of its phrases describing their bilateral relations, and this is raising some eyebrows. Kwon So-ah has more.
An introductory section about the relationship between Korea and Japan on Japan's Foreign Affairs Ministry website used to say that Korea, an important neighbor, shares basic thoughts on freedom, democracy, and economic issues. But the ministry has taken out a chunk of the explanation, and now it just says that Korea is Japan's most important neighbor. Japan's foreign ministry said the change was made to make it similar to recently used expressions. In fact, 2 years ago, when Prime Minister Shinzo Abe talked about Korea-Japan relations, he used wording that was similar to what used to be on the homepage, while what he said during a policy meeting last month was more like the current expression.
Korea is our most important neighboring country.
The Japanese Asahi Shimbun newspaper quoted a government official as saying the revision shows Japan's mistrust towards Korea. While Korea's foreign ministry did not make specific comments on the significance of the change, it told Arirang News that it's up to the Japanese government to explain what's behind their revision. There is speculation that the removal of the words may hold some greater meaning, as Abe has recently hinted he will take out references to Japan's war atrocities in a statement he'll make in August, marking Japan's surrender at the end of World War II. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Korean civic groups are demanding that the United States apologize for the controversial comments made by a senior U.S. official. Protesters in front of the U.S. Embassy here in Korea say remarks by Undersecretary of State Wendy Sherman last week target Korea and China and let Japan get away with whitewashing its wartime atrocities. Sherman's statement that said political leaders should not exploit nationalist feelings and earn cheap applause by vilifying a former enemy sparked outrage here in Korea. The U.S. State Department later clarified that Sherman's comments did not indicate a shift in Washington's stance on the historical tensions in Northeast Asia. On the second day of her Saudi Arabia visit, President Park Geun-hye presented her vision for the future of Korea-Saudi Arabia economic cooperation, where she touched on the need to jointly develop new energy industries. Chae-Sun has more on the president's initiatives to synergize Saudi Arabia capital with Korean technology.
Meeting with Korean and Saudi business leaders, President Park Geun-hye said nuclear and renewable energy are the answer to power supply in the future. She urged both sides to initiate joint ventures in search of new energy, which will then place Korea and Saudi Arabia as the driving force of future energy industries. Just the day before, Seoul and Riyadh agreed to work together in nuclear energy development and look into commercializing Korea's very own small-sized nuclear reactor to a third country. On Wednesday, Seoul and Riyadh signed another deal to conduct a joint research into desalination technologies to minimize costs while maximizing efficiency. Like many other countries in the Middle East, water supply is a major issue of concern here in Saudi Arabia. And that is why Korea's smart nuclear reactor appealed to the Saudi government for its ability to produce 40,000 tons of fresh water a day by desalination. Matching Saudi Arabia's abundance in capital with Korea's technological and industrial competitive edge is another one of President Park's visions for bilateral cooperation. In line with this, the president met Kingdom Holding Company CEO Al-Walid bin Talal, considered the Warren Buffett of the Middle East, to discuss the investment firm's reported interest in Korean cultural contents. Riyadh has also shown interest in Korea's cybersecurity technology and know-how.
By assisting Saudi Arabia develop its cybersecurity, Korea will set the stage for a huge achievement not only in Saudi Arabia or the Middle East, but also in global cybersecurity and, moreover, the global safety industry.
Wrapping up the second leg of our regional tour, President Park will depart for the United Arab Emirates Wednesday evening. Chae-Sun, Arirang News, Riyadh.
It's not easy for young people in Korea to find a decent job these days, but what could be even more worrisome is that even if they do find a job, their income is growing at a rate that's in the 0% range now. Our Shin Se-min takes a closer look.
Korea's younger generation posted the worst income growth last year. The average monthly income of households headed by people in their 20s and 30s was around $4,000. That's an increase of just 0.7% compared to a year earlier, according to Statistics Korea, even lower than growth figures after the global financial crisis. A major reason behind the slowdown is the country's youth unemployment rate that's hit a record high of 9% last year. As a result, even young people with jobs often have to start their careers on short-term contracts with little stability.
Younger people have to find jobs quickly and earn money in order to raise Korea's labor productivity. But that's not what's happening now, and this will of course have a negative impact on the overall Korean economy.
And as the cost of basic living expenses rise, like monthly rent, the amount of debt the younger generation is responsible for keeps piling up. Last year, the average debt of households headed by people under the age of 40 was over $14,000, up more than 11% from 2013. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
The buzz surrounding Samsung Electronics these days has been focused on its mobile payment service, Samsung Pay. The company says its current plan is to target Korea and the United States rather than the global market. It's planning on sealing deals with 6 Korean credit card firms by the summer and will make the service available in the second half of this year. It's already inked deals with several U.S. payment companies, including Visa and MasterCard. The service platform will be featured on Samsung's recently unveiled smartphones, Galaxy S6 and S6 Edge. And taking you to the Mobile World Congress in Spain, where a wide range of innovative products are being showcased, from wearables and Internet of Things devices to 5G platforms 1,000 times faster than current networks. It's all there. Our Sean Lim has more.
Hello, smart bike.
Hello.
Right turn signal on.
A rider controls his motorcycle with just a simple verbal command. He interacts with the bike to check his speed and asks for directions during his ride. This is all possible thanks to Internet of Things technology and a mobile chipset in his helmet.
And using our Intel Edison to add into the bike that communicates to the Intel Edison that's inside the helmet, enabling an Internet of Things and interaction between the bike and the motorcycle rider.
That's just one of the gadgets on display at this year's Mobile World Congress in Barcelona. This air purifier is another. It sends information about the air quality inside a room to a smartphone in real time. This smart purification system, integrated with the Internet of Things, is able to measure the air quality on its own and turn the air purifier on when necessary. Experts say that in order to make devices like these commercially viable, what's needed is a new generation of mobile telecommunications technology that's faster and can deal with an enormous amount of data.
IoT is real. It is here today. And we need our networks to support this huge growth that is coming.
Korea's 3 domestic mobile carriers are playing a leading role in promoting the IoT market at the event in Barcelona. And they're showcasing their latest 5G platforms with a heavy emphasis on the fact that the network is 1,000 times faster than the existing 4G LTE networks. 손정인, Arirang News.
Over the next 3 days, we're going to take an in-depth look into the world's second biggest economy, China. On the first part of this series, Kim Min-ji explains what's slowing the Chinese economy down and what's being done to turn everything back to normal.
After decades of breakneck expansion, the Chinese economy wound down last year to its slowest pace in 24 years. It grew 7.4%, falling short of the government's target of 7.5%. At this year's major political meetings, China is expected to lay the groundwork for further reforms to aid this period of slowing growth.
China isn't expected to record double-digit growth anymore given the size of its economy. Its exports and investment, which were once important growth drivers, are now seen as unsustainable.
China's exports have slumped in recent years due to sluggish global demand, and the country's heavy dependence on investments led to severe problems, including income inequality and an imbalance between consumption and investment. China describes the slowing momentum as the new normal, and efforts are underway to transform the economy to one that's driven by domestic consumption and services. The government has implemented various policies aimed at boosting consumption, such as accelerating urbanization, adopting universal health care, and easing regulations in the service sector.
China's consumption will start to rebound by 2020, according to our calculation. China's consumption will reach around 44% of GDP from the current 36%. By that time, Chinese consumption market will be $10.7 trillion.
Analysts see the slowdown in 2014 as a prelude to slower growth this year, as they don't foresee China's domestic-led growth to have an immediate impact. What's more, there are looming uncertainties for the global market, which is dependent on the Chinese economy for growth.
And Korea is no exception, with China as its leading trade partner. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Korea and the United States have pledged to strengthen their cooperation in setting up communications policies. The head of Korea's communications regulator, Choi Sung-jun, met his American counterpart, Tom Wheeler, on the sidelines of the Mobile World Congress over in Barcelona, where they agreed to push for policies on net neutrality, also called the open internet. This involves ensuring that governments and internet service providers allow the public to freely access data or services on the internet. With the concept of the Internet of Things and big data becoming more prevalent, the two countries also agreed on the rising need to protect online privacy.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu takes aim at an emerging nuclear agreement between the United States and Iran, describing it as a direct threat to world peace.
With more, we turn to Paul Yee at the News Center. Paul, Netanyahu made these comments during his controversial address to U.S. lawmakers. What else did he have to say?
Well, Netanyahu argued the proposed deal will not only help Iran develop nuclear weapons, but it will also spark a nuclear arms race in the Middle East. Meanwhile, U.S. President Barack Obama dismissed the warnings and said the prime minister offered no other viable alternative. Arirang's Park Ji-won has more.
Speaking before the U.S. Congress on Tuesday, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu stressed that the current nuclear negotiations between the U.S. and Iran will only help Iran develop nuclear weapons capability.
This deal has two major concessions. One, leaving Iran with a vast nuclear program. And two, lifting the restrictions on that program in about a decade.
The Israeli Prime Minister also warned the deal will spark a fresh nuclear arms race in the Middle East, threatening stability in the region. The speech received loud applause from Republican lawmakers, but Obama's fellow Democratic lawmakers expressed their discontent with the speech, and dozens boycotted the speech.
The invitation and the speech set a dangerous precedent whereby congressional leaders from one party can invite a foreign politician to publicly oppose the policies of the sitting president on the House floor.
President Obama defended the position of his administration, saying the Israeli prime minister didn't offer any viable alternatives.
If we're successful in negotiating, then in fact this will be the best deal possible to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. Nothing else comes close.
Obama refused to meet Netanyahu as the Israeli prime minister is facing an upcoming election later this month, and the visit could be seen as interference. Despite the Israeli prime minister's rejection of the deal, the U.S. and Iran are continuing their nuclear talks in Switzerland. The U.S. hopes to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon in exchange for a gradual lifting of economic sanctions. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
And shifting to Ukraine, a deadly explosion has rocked a coal mine in the eastern rebel-held city of Donetsk. Emergency crews there are scrambling to rescue those still trapped underground. As many as 70 people were working inside the mine when it erupted in flames on Wednesday morning. According to government officials, over half the miners remain unaccounted for, with many fearing they may be dead.
There was an explosion. It's not known where the people are, what condition they are in. No one knows so far. The investigation commission and the expert commission will now determine what happened and then make an announcement.
The cause of the blast, the Yazaro mine, was not immediately clear. However, a spokesperson for the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic reportedly blamed it on trapped methane gas. A previous explosion at the same industrial site back in 2007 had killed 106 people. And turning to Southeast Asia, Indonesia has transferred 2 Australian convicts to an island for their planned execution. Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott launched a last-minute appeal to save the men's lives before they face a firing squad. The 2 Australian citizens were moved to the maximum security prison in Bali on Wednesday. The pair were arrested at an airport for trying to smuggle heroin and were convicted in 2005 as the ringleaders of a drug gang. The Australian government stressed that the prisoners have been rehabilitated while warning of the potential diplomatic fallout.
I think right now millions of Australians are feeling sick in their guts at the prospect of execution for these two. I've been saying again and again that this is contrary to Indonesia's national interest and it's contrary to Indonesia's best values.
Indonesian President Joko Widodo has repeatedly denied clemency for the Australians and the 9 other convicted gang members on death row. The country imposes harsh penalties for drug trafficking and had resumed the use of capital punishment in 2013 after a 5-year suspension. And following up on the latest political events in China, the government has declared that it plans to increase its 2015 defense spending by around 10% for this year. The budget hike is expected to focus on ramping up the country's investment in high-tech military hardware, from submarines to stealth jets. It comes after a nearly 2-decade run of double-digit increase in military spending for the world's second largest economy.
Compared to other world powers, the road for China's defense modernization is more difficult. We have to rely on ourselves for most of our military equipment and research and development, sometimes from scratch. In addition, we must strengthen the protection of our officers and soldiers.
In comparison, Beijing's defense spending rose over 12% last year to $130 billion, second only to the United States. Wednesday's announcement comes on the eve of the opening of the National People's Congress, where the official budget figures will be released. And that wraps up our look at international stories for now. I'll see you back here tomorrow night.
Hello everyone, I'm Stephen Che with the Sports Brief. Now another star from South Korea's legendary 2002 World Cup run has hung up his cleats. Seol Gi-hyun retires after a prolific 15-year career on the pitch. The former striker isn't leaving the game altogether, however, having decided to switch to a head coaching career. The 36-year-old said it was an easy call after being named the interim head coach of Seongyun University in Seoul. Seol played in Belgium, England, Saudi Arabia, and Korea in his club career, and internationally he scored 19 goals in 82 appearances, the most memorable being the late-game equalizer in the 2002 World Cup round of 16 against Italy. Moving on, the text message scandal of Malky Mackay has breathed new life as new evidence. More offensive text has come to light. Former employer Cardiff City submitted the new messages to England's Football Association, which then decided to delay their verdict. Cardiff forced the probe last summer, unveiling Mackay's racist, sexist, homophobic, and anti-Semitic messages from when he was with the team. Now, Kim Bo-kyung, who was called a derogatory name for Asians in the text, joined his former boss at Wigan early last month and apparently harbors no hard feelings. And going over to pro volleyball, the Samsung Hwajae Blue Fangs are the season champs after their latest win, but 3 other playoff spots are still up in the air. Case in point, the OK Savings Bank Russian Cash took down the LIG Graders and now need just 3 points to seal their spot at second place. The Bees earned their 3rd straight shutout and faced their last 3 matches of the season. Finally to golf, with the season's first 4 LPGA tournaments in the bag, can Korean-born golfers keep the winning streak going? Pros of Korean heritage, from Amy Yang last week to wonderkind Lydia Go and Korean-American Christina Kim and more, have won the last 8 tournaments consecutively and 12 of the last 14. That's impressive to say the least. And with Ko Park-in-bi and rookie Kim Hyo-ju and others set to tee off for the HSBC Women's Champions on Thursday, the streak is in good hands. And that wraps it up for now. Your weather's up next. Good night.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kim Bo-kyung with your weather outlook. Cold air from the north along with strong winds are making conditions feel about 4 degrees colder than the actual readings. Plus, humidity levels have dipped to as low as 19% in parts of Gyeongsangnam-do province. At the moment, it is mostly clear skies nationwide, and similar conditions will continue through tomorrow, allowing us to check out the full moon, as it'll be Jeongwol Daeborim here in Korea, which marks the first full moon of the lunar year. So the moon is set to rise at about 6:09 p.m. here in Seoul and about 6:02 p.m. over in Busan. Otherwise, tomorrow's low should be similar to today, but daytime highs will be a couple of degrees warmer, and this cold snap should continue through Friday morning and on to tomorrow's readings. Seoul should reach a high of 6, cities down south should hit 8. Meanwhile, Daejeon and Jeju peak at 6, Dokdo reaches 3. That'll do it for now. I'll see you soon.
Bo-kyung, thank you very much. And that's Primetime News for this Wednesday. I'm Kang Chery. Thanks for watching.
And I'm Sean Lim. Have a great night. We'll see you soon.